Hello and welcome to the Early Career Researcher podcast, your regular discussion on all things relating to the life and work of early career researchers working in the humanities. I'm Charlie and today I'm joined by Olivia. Hello, Olivia. Olivia's muted. Hello, Olivia. And hello, Rachel. Rachel,
Hello,
say hello.
hi.
Hello, Olivia. Hello, Rachel.
Hi.
Great start. Um, Cool. Okay, so we are back in January. Hopefully, you all have listened to our previous podcast on how to enjoy the holiday period. If you haven't, go back and listen to it now and learn all the things you should have been doing to enjoy your holiday period, but didn't.
Go
Um,
back and enjoy your holiday period.
Go back and enjoy your holiday. And you can go back to the end of that episode where we talked about how to reconnect with your work at the beginning of January. If you're finding that difficult, then please, we've got some pointers there. Our topic today is called application season, and this was Olivia's idea. So Olivia, tell us, why did you have this idea for today's topic?
Oh, well, I'm just starting the final year of my PhD, but pretty much everybody that I know as a colleague and even some of my closest friends are either in the final stages of finishing their PhDs or have just finished and are applying for their first postdocs. And I just saw just how stressful it was and just how how many hurdles there were to navigate. And I thought there's a lot of information here that like I've been able to take away from that process, I think, but also like questions that have come out of that I felt maybe you guys could help answer and we could talk about a little bit more. So
Yeah,
I just
cool.
thought it's that time of year.
Yeah. So we've got Rachel, who currently is fulfilling a job as a postdoctoral researcher on a project. So I'm sure you've got lots to add to this, Rachel. Um,
We'll see. I will disclaimer that I am not an expert. I just can talk about my own experience.
I think if anyone's listened to our podcast so far, they'll know none of us are experts in anything, but we have ideas. Um, and so today we're going to look at applying for postdoctoral researcher roles. So we mean roles where the main part of your job is research with very limited, if at all, any teaching. And I think we will be talking about applying on how to apply for teaching posts and how to manage teaching posts in a later episode. So I think that will be a really cool one for us to pick up on. Um, we are also going to make discussions at some point on applying for non-academic jobs, and we're keen to get some guests in. So if you have any suggestions for contributors on that topic, non-academic jobs, or if you would like to contribute yourself having done one, then please write to us. And here's how. So you can leave reviews or comments on our Spotify feed. You can follow us on Twitter, X, and our tag is @ECR Podcasters. And now we're on Blue Sky too, where our name is also ECR Podcasters. You can email ecrpodcasters@gmail.com, and we'd love it if you, our listeners, have ideas for topics you'd like us to talk about in future episodes beyond the ones we've just mentioned. And a very special thanks to those who've listened so far, including hello Kenya, to the people who've been listening to us in Kenya. That was really cool. And a note, please do tell your friends and share to the world about us on your social media and just in conversations, because we're nothing without our listeners. And a last thing to mention is that you can find us on our new website, which we are calling the Early Career Researcher Hub. And the description, I'll give a link to this in the description of the podcast. It's quite a long link. It's ecrpodcasters.wixsite.com/ECR Hub. And if you think the URL is too clunky, then please sponsor us so we can afford to pay for a neater address. You're very welcome. Okay, so let's move on. Please do get in touch and give us all that information. Tell us what you think about the show. We're going to talk about postdoctoral research jobs today. And Olivia is going to kick us off by summarizing the two things we're mainly going to talk about, and then we'll crack on. So Olivia, over to you.
Yeah, so I think we're going to start off by talking about open call early career research fellowships, meaning those that you kind of apply for with your own research project idea and that you kind of develop your own project idea in the process. And then if we have time, we're going to get to postdoctoral roles that are effectively kind of jobs on funded projects.
Mm-hmm.
And if for whatever reason we don't get to those today, we will cover them in a subsequent podcast.
Yeah.
But those are kind of the two The kind where you develop your own research project and the kind where you are working on somebody else's research project.
Yeah, so I'm going to start by talking about what we're describing as open call junior research fellowships, or JRFs for short, and then Rachel is going to do section 2 on jobs on existing projects. So we'll start with open call JRFs, junior research fellowships. It's probably a good idea to flag that most open call fellowships for early career academics happen in September to December. So universities will be looking for possible candidates in that period before Christmas in the autumn. So although September feels a long way from now, it's not a bad idea to begin developing your ideas and putting together maybe a spreadsheet of what institutions and fellowships you'd like to apply for so that you don't miss the deadlines as they come later in the year. So if you think you're, yeah, go for it. Yeah.
I was gonna say, and I think if you did apply back in September and you're just in kind of in the midst of the process, we're gonna touch a little bit on that as
Yeah,
well.
of course. Yeah, hopefully we're going to give you some kind of motivation and encouragement. So if you are in the last year of your PhD, or if you've finished a PhD earlier and in this year, academic year, and you want to apply for one of these jobs coming up at the end of last summer, then we have some useful things for you. And also if you're in the midst of the process, hopefully we do too. So there are different types of open call early career fellowships. In the UK, we run a system that's broadly called Early Career Fellowships, ECR Fellowships, funded by groups like the Leverhulme Trust and the British Academy, and there are others for different countries as well, but we'll put the links for these in our podcast description and on our website. And applying for these consists of really submitting a research proposal and a written application. Institutions that you might want to apply to do this will filter the applications first. So what you usually have to do is apply to the institution that you want to work at in order to get their attention. They will ask for more information than the actual funders might want. For example, why you fit well into that university and that department and that group of scholars. And you have to find a member of faculty who is willing to act as your mentor for that application. They will have to agree before you apply to that institution. And that kind of, it doesn't mean they'll necessarily help you with your application at that stage. So don't expect a ton of help there. Some will, some won't.
Wait, hang on. So what, wait, some will and some won't, but like surely they should.
I think it probably depends on whether the person that you've approached to act as your mentor like has capacity at that time, and also whether you've used a spreadsheet and how much time you've given them and yourself for that deadline, right? Whereas like I think mentors, like it's the start of a potentially 3-year relationship, right?
Okay. I guess so. So are they like part of, if you were successful at that university, are they then like also part of your project, like a supervisor?
Yeah.
Not, yeah.
I mean,
not a supervisor, but they act in the capacity as a mentor for your project. I think throughout the whole 3 years,
yeah.
At least that's
So it's
my
kind of like supervisor light.
Yeah.
To kind of wean you off having a supervisor.
I guess the point is you don't need such close supervision as you might have done as a PhD student, but you do, it is really useful as an early career researcher to have a point of contact that you can go to and use if those kinds of situations arise, right?
Right.
And also, I mean, it's quite normal, I would say. Maybe I'm lucky in terms of the institutions I've been at, but any academic job, and a postdoc is a job, you usually have a mentor that you touch base with once a term. And so I think that with Leverhulme and BA, if my understanding is correct, is that a mentor will do the same thing, but they're going to be subject specific, whereas the teaching staff might not be. So I guess they can contribute more.
Somebody to go to if you're kind of struggling with direction or not sure how to get.
And I think when I took part in this process a few years ago, in my experience, all of the people who I wrote to as possible mentors, in every case, that was the first person I approached anyway, and said, I'm thinking of applying for Leverhulme or British Academy research fellowship with your institution. what do you think? Do you think I'm a good fit? Do you like this idea? It was very similar to the process you might go through when you're applying for a PhD originally.
Mm.
And in my case, the people who I approached to be my mentors helped me to develop my project. We'll come to this later, applying to more than one institution. But what I found was that I ended up developing kind of 2 or 3 quite different projects based on the institution. So the actual project I wanted to do slightly differed in each case based on the person I wanted to work with and the place I wanted to work at and the resources it had. So that relationship with someone helping me to develop my project actually was really helpful. So
And that
look
was kind
for
of
it if
based
you,
on that was kind of based on like the interests that sponsor might have, like the research interest they might have, or like
yeah,
the
and because
priorities of the university.
this is a highly competitive process, right? So it's also based on the environment and the areas of specialism that that university has. So you want to be saying things in your project like your proposal, like, you know, this place has a center for the study of whatever, and my project is based on that subject area. Or this institution has scholars who work on this field and they have an existing research project on something that's kind of related to what I want to do, and you're demonstrating relevance of why you and why they're in that particular place.
Interesting.
So let's continue, and you know, we can have questions, I think, as we go through. But once you've found an institution that might want to sponsor you and a person who might want to be your mentor, the department and the institution will then select a certain number of people who they want to sponsor through the application process, because it costs them time and money. So then the institution will work with you, if they've selected you, to help improve your application further. Some institutions have research officers who will help you augment certain parts of your project that they think the funding body wants to fund. And then they send them off to the funding body for the final call. So they will submit it for you. And you pray basically for the rest of that process. It's important to keep in mind that this does take a while. So you might be applying to an institution in September or October, and if you're successful there, you won't hear from the funding body until maybe May or the spring, so May, April, something like that. And you won't take up the position until September or October. So this really is a year-long process at the maximum term. So
Which,
bear
like, let's
in
just
mind.
acknowledge, I think, for PhDs and ECRs, how much that sucks. That it's a long
Yeah.
process because, you know, you're trying to finish your PhD or whatever, and then you're like, what if, yeah, yeah, it's just not fun.
And the question is like, what do you do in the meantime, right? Like, what do you do to like
Oh,
fill that gap?
do you want me to say what I did, Rachel? Say what you did? I mean,
Yes, please.
what did you do, Rachel?
So I had a part-time job at a university and then working in a library while I was finishing my PhD. So I continued to hold that in the period in between submitting and
Applying.
doing a Viva, sorry. And then I got a non-academic job, and I had a non-academic job for a year before I got an academic job.
Okay.
So yeah, went outside of academia.
It sounds like a long time, but I mean, I don't know. I had a similar situation. I had part-time jobs at the end of my PhD, and I carried on doing those in the town where I did my PhD. And then my partner got a job. We both basically finished PhDs at the same time. They got a job in a new city that we moved to, and I kind of had no job for a year while I did these kinds of applications. And I like basically bumped up my publications. That was
Right.
like, I was really lucky that I could afford to spend some of my time during the week just working on applications like journal articles. And I was editing a volume with a couple of people, and that edited volume that I did that year, I think that's the best thing I've ever produced in my academic career so far. So, you know, it was
Really?
worthwhile. Yeah, it's the first thing I did. It's all been downhill since then.
I
So,
should mention that like 3 of the people I know applying for postdocs at the moment are working in either hospitality or retail.
mm,
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
they've also got
totally.
one of them, actually both of them also have part-time jobs in the academy. So they're kind of juggling both, but like it's amazing, and I think it should be sort of be very clear that like plenty of people do that,
Yeah.
as far as I can tell.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Fairly
also
common.
that while you're in the midst of these applications, it's so grinding and draining, but hopefully people can take a moment to like applaud themselves for holding a job in whatever capacity while also writing very intensive applications that are emotionally draining. So just like well done to anyone who's out there and who has
Yeah.
applied and is applying.
I love that, Rachel.
Yeah,
That's so cool.
agreed. So at one point, my flatmate she was working a part-time job as a university lecturer, 2 days a week, and she was working as a waitress at the same time, which is amazing.
Yeah.
And she was working on her Leave for Hume application.
Wow.
Wow.
And so effectively she had 3 part-time jobs and she wasn't taking any weekends.
Wow.
And things went south after maybe 3 months of that. And at some point we had to sort of step in and be like, you need to be taking weekends. It doesn't have to be Saturdays and Sundays, but you need to be taking 2 days off a week, preferably in succession. And she didn't really do that until her initial Leave for Hume application had gone in, but then she was able to take a bit of space. But yeah, like Rachel says, it's a lot of work and it's emotionally draining.
I feel like regular listeners are getting to know your flatmate really well, Olivia, from sharing their experiences.
She is my point of reference for everything.
If I meet someone ever in London who fits the description, I'm going to say, "You're Olivia's flatmate. I know you."
Let's call her Maria.
Okay.
And we'll just reference Maria from now.
I was writing about the theology of the Virgin Mary yesterday, so there you go.
There you go. She is the Virgin.
Maria.
Let's call her the Virgin Mary.
Okay.
Actually, she can be the 4th host of this podcast.
So we had one thing we also wanted to talk about was how do you choose which university to apply for these fellowships? So certainly in the UK, the easiest way to find potential hosts is that they will advertise their capacity to host postdocs, and they usually do it in the autumn, often using the website jobs.ac.uk, which we've linked on our website if you want to go and find that. There's some resources there. Because it costs these institutions money, right? Some of the fellows, go on.
Oh, I was thinking about this as you're speaking, is that for context, it's important if you've never applied to Leave for Hume before to know that Leave for Hume isn't paying all of your salary, right? The institutions are contributing to what you're paid.
Is it a specific amount? Is it 50% or is it?
I think it's 50, but I don't know. Do you know, Charlie?
Yeah, I think it's 50. It certainly was when I was going through it.
Yeah.
4 or 5 years ago. So
right, so it's costing them to have a postdoc.
Yeah, so that means that the types of institutions that will host you are usually only fairly big hitting or ambitious research institutions. So, you can name them probably.
Yeah. And one of the things that they might ask you for, which we didn't mention, is a budget for your research expenses. And this is because, of course, they are paying for you as well as Leave for Hume, so they're interested to know how much you might be looking for. So be prepared to cost out your research expenses potentially for your project.
Interesting. Not just your salary, your
Humanities,
your
that's going to be like, give me a salary, let me buy some books, and let me go to some conferences, and let me do some research visits.
Yeah, or if you site visits as like an archaeologist or something like that, do you need a specialist camera? What equipment do you need? All of these things you have to think about, which is also time consuming. So just a heads up.
That said, also, I mean, obviously you don't want your project to be super expensive, but if I can add anything from my experience in the charity sector for a number of years, like cost in anything you can think of. Like, don't be shy, because if you're working from home, cost in like a new chair. You know what I mean? I genuinely think people shouldn't be too shy about saying this is what I will, like, make sure it's stuff that you need, but if you need it, you need it. And like, don't be shy about costing in 10 research visits if that's what you think you're going to need, because it's better to have that costed in from the beginning than to
Yeah, to need to
And
find
often
it.
you'll have to
find the money at the end. But if you obviously you have to justify it, right?
Yeah, exactly. And you'll probably have to give a timeline about at what point you're going to need this money and why.
Right.
So you are really planning out your whole future for the next 3 years. But anyhow, we digress. I
Okay.
just thought it was
Yes.
important to
Yeah,
we
I-
note.
have
no, I
we have
agree.
others to get through, so we're going to like mention some more. So other funding bodies that may exist involve Marie Curie funding, future leaders. There's also, do they still do study abroad fellowships funded by the European Union? Is that one that still happens? So when I was going through it, I mean, are we in the European Union? There's a good question. But
No.
certainly when I was going through this, you could apply to spend a year somewhere in Europe studying and doing research.
Was that like an
Um,
Erasmus fellowship?
um, it wasn't called an Erasmus Fellowship. I think it was called EU Study Abroad.
I
We'll
mean,
look
there
these
might
things
be,
up and put them in the
yeah,
description.
maybe something in the European Research Council, but
Yeah.
I'm not sure
I
whether we're
think-
still eligible for that now.
I think Horizon Europe has been reinstated, and I think there are
Yes.
open call ECR fellowships from Horizon Europe.
Yeah. So
Thanks,
look
Olivia, I
on the
forgot.
European Union research funding website because there may be things there that you might want to apply for. We also have Rachel put in this
Yeah.
great one, which I know some people who've done it, which is called Teach at Tübingen in Germany. And this is a brilliant fellowship that I know some people who've done. And essentially, you go to the beautiful city of Tübingen in Germany and you design a course or a couple of courses in 2 courses entirely related to your research specialism on anything you like. And you get
Oh,
research
fun.
time and a research budget, and you get to live in Tübingen for a year. And I've known a few people who've done it, and the success rate is not, it's not great, but it's pretty good.
It's pretty good. I mean, I
Well-
would say I'm happy to like speak about this. I was offered a post there.
Oh, you were. That's right. And you
Yeah.
didn't take it.
I didn't take it only because I guess we have to be practical. I then was offered a 5-year postdoc over a 1-year postdoc. So
Yeah.
I went with the 5-year. But it is an incredible program. Tübingen is an excellent university. And I believe it's open to, that program's open to anyone in the humanities, I think. And yeah, they do give you dedicated research time as well as teaching experience, which is both a good
You
few
need
days.
if you want to be an academic.
Yeah.
And it's in
Okay.
English? You deliver your courses in English?
Yep.
You deliver your courses in English, and it's also a really great experience to learn how teaching at universities happens in non-UK universities, which I strongly advocate for.
Wow.
And
And
then
if you've,
oh,
you
sorry.
know, brushing up on your German too while you're there, if you've ever wanted to learn German, it's great.
Yeah. And also if you're interested in other fellowships like the Humboldt fellowships, kind of Teach at Tübingen is an excellent gateway to then create contacts with German institutions and think about maybe moving into another postdoc, like the Humboldt fellowships.
Yeah.
So
Okay, cool. We've got a couple more to mention. Another route is to look at centers of research that have slightly lesser known fellowships and often more discipline specific. They can be really good options, but you have to do some research to even find out which ones are relevant to you. So for example, the Centre for History and Economics at Cambridge usually offers 3-year fellowships, and we'll put that in the description for our website as well. When I was going through this process, the Medieval Institute at the University of Notre Dame in the US used to run a postdoctoral fellowship scheme, which now no longer exists, but it's an example of the types of things that do exist. So it's probably
I mean, if we're going to talk about the States, I think
go on,
I'm not enormously familiar with the landscape in the States, but I know that there are a lot more funded part-time fellowships there, or not part-time, a lot more funded short, 3-year kind of fellowships there than there are here in the UK.
So this can take some time to kind of wade through everything that exists. It's the type of conversation you might want to have with your PhD supervisor as you get near the end, or just after you finish perhaps, or with your PhD examiners who might be able to help you as well. But basically, I'd say anyone who has some kind of insider knowledge of the discipline that you work in is a good person to talk to find out about these things. And if you're attending larger academic conferences where you will meet more people and talk to them about your current situation, they might be able to tell you things as well. So it's a kind of thing where you can spend hours and hours trying to search for things which may actually not be there. But you can spend hours searching for things and find something that comes up. So one more thing to mention is the Oxford and Cambridge Junior Research Fellowship Scheme. Now, colleges will offer junior research fellowships at Oxford and Cambridge. Some are subject specific, such as classics, engineering. Others might be more general, like humanities and so on. And your job again there is to provide them a research project that already exists. I should mention also these kinds of open call things. It's a good idea to say, this follows on naturally from my PhD in these ways, or like this builds on the skills I learned in my PhDs these ways. Or if it's a radical departure from your PhD topic, then explain why you want to do something totally different, but you're qualified for, and those kind of things. The JRFs at Oxford and Cambridge all have slightly different criteria as they're each run through the colleges. They all have different deadlines. You've really got to check the job posting really carefully. Criteria revolves
Can I
around the
just
time. Yeah,
interject, Charlie? Just
Yeah.
as you were kind of telling us about these, it struck me that you have to be so good at time management and organization, which is such a like normal thing that you have to give evidence for in a job application. So if you are ever applying to a job that is academic, you should just be like, I applied for all of these different JRFs and like ECR fellowships. To be so good at time management and organization. It should count as evidence.
It absolutely. I mean, it absolutely is. It does. It not just should. It does. I mean, just make sure that you're like throwing that in. Like, I apply for 27,000 fellowships every year.
Well,
And
actually,
I've met every deadline and haven't gotten a single one. Look how good my time management skills are.
Some lecturing jobs I've seen actually require you to show evidence of applying for funding grants because it's part of your expected job, right?
Right.
So,
no. I also tend to like it if you've gotten them. But
time management, right? It's important. Also important to know is that your eligibility for a lot of these JRFs at Cambridge and Oxford depends on when you submitted your thesis or when you passed your viva or when your degree was awarded, whatever date they choose. So for most people, you'll only be eligible to apply in the like first 2 years after you finish your PhD, or the first 3 years or something like that. So bear that in mind when you're thinking, you're planning ahead of when you're going to apply for things. We're going to link you on our website blog to some useful blogs from other people who've held JRFs about advice that relates specifically to the Oxford and Cambridge system. And we've got a couple of those to add to the blog that will accompany this podcast. I'll put a link in the podcast description. And the requirements for these also, surprise, surprise, vary according to the colleges.
Shocker.
So some can be just a research proposal of 500 words.
Which like those I think are like JRFs are pretty competitive and the chances are relatively low. But I think if it's 500 words, it's worth just putting together an abstract and just sending it off. You know, fill out the form, send off your 500 words and like cross your fingers. Like that's like the least stressful, least time consuming like early career fellowship I can think of. Is that an initial 500 word application. And if they like it, then you can run with it from there and it might get more stressful after that. But like I just don't see what the point is in not sending one of those off if it's only 500 words.
Some of them are maybe 2,000 words. Some of them are length,
right?
Like use pages to decide the length, which seems a bit 2001.
Or European, whichever way you think about it.
The shortlisting stage and the long listing stage will probably require a writing sample. So you could send them a thesis chapter, or if you've written an article or a book chapter, you could send that, and then there'll be an interview. So, I mean, let's touch on something that I think people need to know if they're thinking of applying for these schemes. All of the ones that we've mentioned are competitive, right? I mean, can we share some kind of ideas on, I mean, I don't know what the success rate is on Leverhulme applications or British Academy ones, but we can look it up and put it in the blog if you like. But
I've been told, and people shouldn't quote me on this, but I've been told that once you are a candidate, you made a candidate by a university, your chances are between 17 and 25%.
Okay.
Wow.
That's for Leverhulmes. If you've been made a Leverhulme candidate by a university.
Yeah. And when I went through this process, I didn't get any of these postdocs. So another thing to say is like, it doesn't ruin your academic career, because I'm still an academic and I never had one. But I did get selected by a university, which funnily enough is the one I currently work at. So, it took me like 10 years to get back.
Everything comes back
But,
around.
when they selected me as their department candidate, they had 120 applicants and I was the only one they selected. So even getting selected in the first place, that's,
that was a
a shot in the
less
dark,
than
right?
1% chance, yeah.
But something else we wanted to talk about was that it often depends like who you know and who likes you and who's willing to sponsor you and the kind of contacts that you may have made previously. There are some rather disparaging things we could say about the Oxford and Cambridge ones in that way, because
But
it
I would,
often, it often is the case that they go to people who've already been at Oxford or Cambridge, right? What do you want to say,
Yeah.
Rachel? You're going to defend it?
yeah, well, I'm not going to defend it. I'm just going to like make sure we're presenting a balanced account,
Yeah,
because
I agree.
obviously I can list off people who didn't go to Oxford or Cambridge, who got JRFs, but also to be aware more that I think, obviously, I don't know. I've never sat on a Leverhulme panel at a university, but universities really want their candidates to get Leverhulme funding. It looks really good. It's good for universities, ref applications, blah, blah, blah. So they are going to choose applicants that they think will get funding. They don't necessarily know because they're not sitting on the Leverhulme panels,
Yeah.
but they will choose proposals that sound like they will get funding based on the current research climate.
So it's got to be a sexy research topic.
But I just mean, I don't think it's always about who you know at an institution, particularly with Leverhulme BA.
It's not. I think it's not necessarily about who you know in advance. Like you can make that contact while you're talking to your mentor or sponsor person, right? And if that mentor or sponsor person is on top of helping you with your application and that kind of thing, they can champion you at the departmental level and say, I really think this is going to get funding and this is this candidate is worth selecting.
But all mentors don't necessarily sit on the Leverhulme panels at the department level, so can't champion it.
Oh,
so,
do they not? I thought the point was that they
no.
kind of champion your application for you at the
They
departmental
can,
level.
but it doesn't necessarily happen.
Yeah, and it might be in informal conversations. Usually departments will have like a small committee that's responsible for deciding which Leverhulme applications they're going to choose, and they will not consist of all of the mentors by any means, maybe none of them. Sorry.
Okay, interesting.
And we just wanted to finish off this section about open call postdoctoral applications by just a kind of bit of advice on the research proposal section. Bear in mind that almost everybody who's going to be reading this is not an expert in your field of research, right? So if you've got to write 500 words, you've got to write 500 words that any academic in any field can be expected to understand and get the relevance of. So you've really got to sell it. You've got to sell it really early. You've got to make it intelligible to anyone who's an academic, even if they don't know anything about your field. So you've really got to kind of work hard in that sense. They won't be experts, so you've got to tell them why they should care. Basically, the whole like, why should I care aspect of this is really important in this process. I've got some more things to say at the end, but I think we should move on. So shall we move on to section 2? We've definitely got time for this, I think. So Rachel's going to talk us through applying for specific research projects that need a postdoctoral contributor.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to speak about this mainly because I'm currently on someone else's funded project. That's what I was looking for as a postdoc. So usually senior colleagues at institutions will apply to places like Leverhulme, UKRI, and for example, I'm on a European Research Council funded project, and they will apply for funding, and then often they will look to hire 1 or 2 postdocs to assist in the research on that project. This means that there are year-round calls. So while we might be in the middle of application season for Leverhulme, positions on funded projects will come up at any point. And this is because the principal investigator, the PI, might have a delay between being awarded the funding and actually starting the project. They may start the project before they want postdocs to come and join them. They may need to figure out what research needs to be done. So it means you need to keep an eye out all year round. And postdocs are people whose research profiles and skills fit well with the research project. So essentially, you need to be able to fulfill the tasks that your PI is looking for. Now, I think, Olivia, maybe you've posed this question.
So I wanted to know, like, how do you identify, like, I've seen project postdocs come up on jobsac.uk, and I've sort of looked at them and been like, well, I don't know, it like has a couple of the skills that I have, but it's not like my field of research, for example. Like I've seen, I work on medieval manuscripts, and I've seen postdocs that have been like, edit a text from a medieval manuscript in Latin, and I'm kind of like, well, I can do that skills wise, but it's not like my area of subject expertise and that kind of thing. So how well does like your research profile have to fit into the project?
Charlie, do you want to jump in? I have
So
ideas.
I applied for an exact job like that you just described
right.
couple of years ago. And my advice is, obviously you don't want to spend your whole life applying for jobs, but if it's a job that you think you could do and you might enjoy doing, my advice is apply. Because if they don't think you're qualified, they won't select you. If they do think you're qualified, you can attend an interview, discuss the job a bit more, and learn whether you want to do that job, learn whether you would actually enjoy doing that job, and then you can decide then. So my advice would be, if you think there's a chance, go for it.
Yeah.
So the point is, it doesn't have to be like the kind of thing you've already done.
If you've got the skills, that's more important, isn't it, Rachel?
Yeah, I was going to say that exact thing. That it is
Okay.
no, don't be. I think it shows kind of the strength of our conviction. It's that skills are more important, or kind of the priority. Yes, you need some knowledge of the area in which you will be working, but I think PIs know that they won't rarely they'll find someone with the exact match. So it's, can you do the job? You're trained as a classicist, as I don't know, I can't think of any.
An art historian.
Thank you. Yeah, my mind just went totally blank. So don't worry if you have most of the skills, but maybe not research specific. Your thesis was slightly different or whatnot. Still apply.
Okay. Actually, now that I think about it, the project that I'm on as a PhD student is in kind of modern collecting history, but pretty much everybody on it is a medievalist. So nobody's PhD will have been like directly relevant to what we're doing at the moment, but I guess they must have had the skill. I mean, they do. I can vouch to say they have the skills to do it, but it also feels like that was a bit of a learning process for them as much as it has been for me.
And I would just say, based on my experience with my current project, I very much think that I was hired because I have the skills, not the research specific knowledge.
Okay.
And the application that I put in made it clear that I had knowledge in that kind of general geographic and temporal area, but I'm not an expert in lordships, which is what this project is about. But I have the technical skills, particularly the digital humanities skills, which means that I can execute this project well. So don't be afraid to put yourself out there.
Okay. Noted.
And maybe actually this is a good point to talk a little bit about the application. Usually on funded projects, they look very similar to other academic jobs. So you'll have to write a cover letter and put in a CV, and then you'll interview for a job, for the job, sorry. And so it's quite similar. You want to look at that job description. What are they looking for? Make sure you provide evidence in your cover letter, and say, this is what I've done and here's how it fits. And
one thing that occurred to me, sorry to interrupt. One thing that occurred to me is that when I was applying for my PhD, I remember being kind of surprised by the job application, the kind of quote unquote job application process, because I sort of thought that I needed to write my cover letter to say the project that you have that you, the PI, have outlined for a PhD student to do, I will do it, and this is what these are the skills I have to do it. But then when it came to the interview process, they wanted to know how I was, like, what part of it I was going to do, because I think they conceived of the whole project that had been outlined for one PhD student to do as probably too big. And I think that's probably the case for the postdocs as well. In most projects, like the PI has said, I will have a postdoc to do X, but then in the application process, I get the impression that they want you to say, okay, X is quite big, so here's the part of it that I would focus on based on the skills that I have.
I think, yeah, I think that's a good point. Again, I can only speak from my current experience.
All right, yeah,
It's
sure.
my PI laid out very clearly what each of the postdocs should achieve in the job description. And this is a tip, is that I emailed the PI, and you should all do this before you apply to a funded project, and ask for more information, because she shared with anyone who emailed her to ask about it a little bit more about the project, which laid out exactly what she thought each postdoc should achieve within the project. So I actually didn't come in and say, I'm going to do this bit of X. I said, I'm going to do all of X, and here are my skills.
Because she had been able to be very specific.
Yeah, so it will
Right.
vary based on each project.
Interesting. So some can be more specific than others.
And I would say if you're slightly nervous about contacting the PI about this, just remember that if you're in their position, they've advertised for this job. They've no idea who's going to apply in most cases. If someone emails you and says, I'm really interested in this, can you tell me more? Why would you say no? Why
Right.
wouldn't you share your ideas with that person? Because if in their position, they're kind of probably also thinking they want to win you over so that you apply, right? And the more applicants they get, the better. So remember
Yeah.
that.
Also, speaking from experience, again, outside of the academy, but hiring people in the charity sector, writing job descriptions is a really difficult and tedious process. And it's really hard to get into a job description everything that you actually want the applicants to know and describe exactly what you want them to be doing. It's a lot easier to just put the basics, and then if people get in touch, be like, oh, thank God, let's have a Zoom meeting and talk about what we're actually looking for or something, because it's just writing job descriptions is a nightmare.
But also interview is that, isn't it? Like you
Yeah.
might, I tend to approach interviews as, do I want that job as much as do they want me? And in this case, I applied for a job like this before I got the one I've got now, and it was doing a specific skill in an archive in a Cambridge college, and it seemed really exciting. But then they said, this is how the interview is going to work. You're going to have to do a skills test. And I rapidly realized I didn't have the skills. So I withdrew from the application process
Right.
because I would have not passed that skills test, and therefore I wouldn't have enjoyed the job. But I
Right.
only knew that after applying, a bit like you said earlier about should I apply even if I'm not quite sure if I fit, just apply anyway. And in the process of applying, you realize whether you fit and whether they want you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a good point to remember too, Charlie, that if you apply to a funded project, you might have a skills test. Pretty normal, I think.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay,
yeah.
so you put in here, address every bullet point on the job description. Is that what you always do?
Yeah, because you never know if people are going to score it. Some institutions score it and say, right, have they checked it off?
Yeah.
And then give you a score out of
Yep.
however much. So better to make sure you hit everything.
But
That's if it goes.
evidence.
That's usually if it goes through HR, right?
Yeah.
Do these things usually go through HR at universities these days?
I
Surely
don't
what
know.
I think most jobs in a university will be run through HR. This is how I've experienced it in the places
Okay.
I've worked. And HR will get the relevant details from the department who wants to hire, like the job description, the duties, and all that kind of stuff. They will put the application together. They will handle the incoming applications that people make, and they will do the first line of filtering to then pass on to the academics. So it just saves the academics from having to wade through people that genuinely aren't qualified for that job, right? So if you look like you're qualified, you'll probably get put on the pile of ones that academics actually look at. But if for example, they've said we need someone with a PhD and you don't have a PhD, then you go in the bin. And then that person doesn't have to read an extra one, if you get what I mean. So I think I was at a workshop about this once, and a senior academic was saying for a temporary lecturing job that they had in his institution for 1 year, they had something like 200 applications initially, and of those, only something like 80 actually made it to the selection panel. So straight away, that's more than half gone because they didn't meet the essential criteria on the job application. So make sure you meet the essential criteria, and then your application will probably get looked at.
Yeah, and it's again a good reminder that the selection committees are reading dozens of these applications. So the clearer you are in hitting that criteria, the easier it is for them. And so therefore they're more likely to remember your application.
I think at some point we'll do a podcast on how to write a job application letter and how to do a CV, right? Because
are we qualified to do that?
Well, I've had plenty of interviews.
For anything.
I mean, I've had interviews, so I must be doing something right.
No.
They're
I've hired people, and I don't feel qualified to offer advice on how to write a cover letter.
I feel like this is one of those topics where there isn't a golden perfect answer, but there are some things that you can do to improve your stuff, I think.
Yeah.
So
maybe we can invite someone on who sits on a lot of selection committees.
Yeah, good idea.
And or a university careers advisor.
Yes.
Oh, I know one.
There we go.
Let's go with that. Let's go with that.
I guess, Olivia, do you have any other questions about applying to a funded project?
So many questions, but I will narrow them down to a handful for time and for our listeners' sake. I guess one of my questions was how many specific, I mean, for project funded postdocs, you just apply to them as they come up and you think you're qualified. But for the more time limited open call fellowships, like how many can or should you apply to, or how many did you apply to, Charlie? Like my flatmate applied to 8, and I have thoughts about that. And I have a couple of friends who applied to maybe 3.
So I made initial inquiries to maybe 5 or 6, maybe 7 in the kind of in one round of Leverhulme fellowships. Let's say, like I'm looking at 1 year, right, of Leverhulme fellowships. I wrote to maybe 5 or 6 places. Would you have me? Do you think this fits? That kind of thing. After they'd advertised for potential applicants. In the end, I submitted kind of a first round proposal to 2, both of which I thought would be the best fit for me and who showed an interest in me. And then once I was selected to be the candidate for that one, then I withdrew from the other one. So I think you can only apply once to the actual funding body, but
so
you
can kind of through one university.
Yeah. But you can submit as many kind of general inquiries as you want to potential hosts.
But
I don't know.
It seems like an incredibly complicated and time-consuming process.
It is time-consuming. It seems really is.
Because you said you were putting forward 3 different project ideas to 3 different universities based on the interests of your mentors and university departments and how you fit into that university. That's a lot of work going into putting together 3 different project ideas.
Yeah.
And
it really is.
and having to talk to minimum 3 different mentors and kind of liaise and get like feedback.
And if you think that even if you are selected, the chances of being selected are not that high. And then if you are selected, the chance of being successful is, let's say, 25%, and be optimistic. It's a lot of effort. And I know people who were very selective in their application processes and only applied to places that had a brilliant center for what they currently work on and all those kind of things. It's impossible to give it's impossible for me to tell someone what to do about this. If you're listening to this thinking, what should I do? I don't know what to do. I can't tell you what to do. It depends on your own individual situation, how much free time you have for this, how much motivation you have for it, whatever.
Yeah. What one of my friends did was apply to a whole bunch, and then she kind of prioritized a couple that she thought were particularly good and put more work into those, and then took those applications. I think she had 2 different project ideas there, and then took those and had coordinated with like mentors at a handful of other universities, and just chose one of those 2 and sent that off to the other universities as well, just to see if that, kind of what came off. And that seemed to work, but she got so much different and like differing feedback on her applications. So she said one university came back and was like, well, we thought this aspect of the project was particularly strong, but we weren't sure that we saw the relevance to kind of current scholarship or something. And then another university could come back and be like, we thought the clarity for how this project intersects with current scholarship was particularly strong, but we weren't sure that we were totally convinced on the research methodology or something. I think she was like, what am I supposed to do with all of this information? And I think what we decided in the end was like, take the one where you've been accepted and run with it, and don't worry about the other feedback.
That reminds me of when you get, your anonymous review of a journal article, and both the reviewers say different things, and you're like, I don't know what to think anymore.
Does that happen? They often contradict each
Ignore
other.
both.
I mean, I think it highlights like how individualized and personal feedback and like both your own project is, and then feedback can be. And I think a big part of what she took away from that process was that the success of her applications is entirely dependent on the personal research interests of the panel that is assessing your application. And everybody has different opinions about the same field. If they have opinions about the field, it is different from somebody else's opinion. And you kind of have to run with your own opinion.
And again, sorry,
you
Charlie.
You go.
I just think this comes back to something I said earlier. Like, universities are just trying to figure out what will get them funding from Leverhulme, but they don't know 100%. So it's also kind of a shot in the dark for them. Maybe that's unkind, but
I want to say also, like, your success as an academic does not rest on you getting a postdoctoral fellowship, right? I really want to say this because there are other ways to get jobs in academia, right? And so in the UK, for example, junior level jobs will be things like teaching fellowships and fixed term lecturing jobs, where a member of staff is going away for a year or 2 or 3 years on a research project, and they need someone to cover their teaching. You can get a job doing that. And all of my jobs have been like that. And I'm still working in academia nearly 10 years after I finished my PhD. So that doesn't mean you'll never get a job. Postdoctoral research fellowships are amazing because they give you time and they give you funding to build your publication profile, to contribute to what should be, in theory, innovative research. So they are great, but not getting one doesn't mean you'll fail in academia. And I really want to stress that. So people, please remember.
Or indeed in life.
In life, yeah. So for me, applying for these postdoctoral fellowships that I didn't get was really annoying. And my family were all like, oh, you're never going to make it in academia. It's an ivory tower, it's a closed shop, whatever, all the usual stuff. But what I did get was a really good, tight description of the research that I want to do in the next phase of my career, because I'd worked on it as part of these applications. And when I applied for various different short-term lecturing jobs, the future research plans part of those applications were really good because I'd been through this process. So even if you don't get the fellowship that you want, you should come out with a good plan for the research that you might want to do in various different other jobs. So that's worth bearing in mind.
Can I ask, you said that the institution that sponsored you at the Leverhulme level is the one you're working for at the moment. Do you think getting a job there now had anything to do with the fact that they sort of already knew you and had sort of already championed you at some point, or is it just all too contingent and
I
too
think
long
it's
after that
possible,
process?
but it was a long time ago.
Right. Okay.
So the time we're talking about is maybe 7 years different, maybe 6 years.
Okay.
So maybe there are different people making the decisions.
Yeah.
But I think it's fair to say that the job I've got now was helped by the fact that they did know me at the point of application. So who knows?
I mean, the point is you're building networks, right? In the
Yeah.
process of
Yep.
applying to these open fellowships through
Yep.
various universities, you're building networks at various departments.
And you're getting feedback on the next phase of your research. If you're pitching a book to a publisher, you're getting feedback on the type of research that might underpin that book. I don't know.
Yeah. Great. Thank you for answering my questions, guys.
That's all right. I think that's every question, isn't it? Have we got any more?
Oh, things will come up in future episodes.
I mean, yeah. Our listeners will probably have loads of other questions to ask about this.
Right.
I'm sure we've mentioned some things in passing that maybe aren't clear to everybody. So if you do have questions about anything we've mentioned, get in touch with us. Follow us on Twitter, ECR Podcasters, or Blue Sky, ECR Podcasters. Email ecrpodcasters@gmail.com. Can you see there's a theme here? You can leave comments and feedback under the Spotify podcast feedback thing there. So, get in touch with us is simply the best thing to do. We love hearing from people and hearing about what you like and what you want to know more about. And that helps us decide what we're going to be talking about next. So, yeah, I think that will do. Anything else to add, Rachel, Olivia? Like, what would your final word be? Yeah, exactly. Stay strong, everyone.
Usually you ask us what our one piece of advice take away from this is.
Go on.
I think mine is based on seeing my friends go through the process, and it's don't put all of your eggs in this basket.
Not just one basket, this basket being the postdocs.
Dude, I guess I specifically mean open call postdocs, LibreHumes, BAs, that kind of thing. Like, go for it if you want to do it, but don't assume that it is the only way forward or predicate your entire future on it.
Yeah, and I think I would follow that by saying that rejections aren't indications of the quality of your research or your ideas, and it's so easy to be beaten down by rejections. I'm very guilty of that, but it is out of your control, many of these decisions. And so you're still an excellent researcher, you still have great ideas, and please try and hold on to that if you can.
Yeah, that's so positive. I'm not going to say anything else. Let's do that. It isn't a judgment on you. Have many eggs, have many baskets. Throw eggs
Become a
until
chicken.
Become
a chicken.
If you throw enough of it, some of it sticks. There you go. That's my advice.
You've got to break a lot of eggs to get one to stick to a wall.
We're mixing everything here. This is horrible.
Okay,
Let's
we'll
finish.
say goodbye.
On that note.
Okay. Yes, thank you for listening to the Early Career Researcher podcast, episode 6, application season. It's goodbye from me, Charlie, and goodbye from Rachel.
Goodbye.
Goodbye from Olivia.
Bye.
We hope to talk to you again soon.